Welcome to the Human Flourishing Project. I'm your host, Alex Epstein. The subject of today's show is the search for truly great content, part 3. If you haven't heard the previous episodes, here's the basic idea. I love great content. And by great content, what I really mean is great thinking about all kinds of different issues, but particularly issues that are crucial, that are complex, that are controversial, where there's commentary all over the place on the web, and most of it is junk, and it's really hard to find good stuff. And yet, when I do find good stuff, it can literally be life-changing. And even if not life-changing, it can definitely be life-enhancing. So I've been thinking a lot lately about how do I find truly great content? How do I find great thinking on issues that I care about? And when I say great thinking, I don't necessarily mean thinking that I'll agree with or thinking that's necessarily right. Although when I talk about great thinking, it's something that tends to lead more to the truth. But I think about certain universals of great thinking and great communication, things like giving documented evidence for your claims and engaging the best arguments of people who disagree with you, giving clear explanations, having just a coherent viewpoint, being sincere. They're just certain qualities, certain attributes that just about everyone will agree is part of what it means to think effectively about an issue. And what I find is that if I can get people who are thinking in that way, and then if I can get people from different viewpoints who are generally thinking well, who are good representatives of the different viewpoints, then my mind expands so much because I have a much better opportunity of knowing what's right, because if I see the best arguments from different positions, I'll often get a sense of, oh, wow, this one is way better than the others. Even if the others seem pretty good, they break down, and this other one, the right one, is really right. But then also just hearing different opinions with good thinking, it just tends to lead to better decisions. And I think there are lots of studies and whatnot on this, but it's also just common sense. So, interested in finding great thinking on any issue that I'm interested in, and sometimes I want to find it just on issues that I didn't even know about. But somebody says, "Oh, wow, there's a really good piece of thinking on some issue," I'll often check it out. But it's super hard, and it's interestingly hard because on the internet we've got unlimited content, and really there's more great thinking on the internet than you would ever have time to consume. And yet it's almost impossible to find. I mean, you think about it, there's no Google for good stuff, right? There's no way, really, no consistent way to search for, hey, I want stuff that's actually good. I don't want trash. I don't want junk. I don't want sensationalism. I don't want to, just be stimulated. I don't want clickbait. Like, I actually want people who are seriously thinking about issues. I want to see what they say, and I only want to see that. Actually, I would, there isn't a place like that. There's not a tool that gives you that. There are some good websites that good thinkers have, particularly bloggers. If it's a good blogger, they'll have good stuff. And then there are sites, newspapers and whatnot, they occasionally have good stuff, but they're so motivated to just produce prodigious amounts of things, in part because they're supported by advertising. So there's every incentive not to have particularly high quality stuff consistently. And then there's an incentive to have super recent stuff and current stuff. And yet most of the good thinking, by definition, did not happen yesterday. It happened a long time ago, and in response to things that have happened over long periods of time. So in the series of shows, The Search for Truly Great Content, what I have tried to do is I've tried to leverage my amazing audience of this show, the Human Flourishing Project, as well as just certain social media friends and followers that I have, and ask them, hey, what do you think is truly great content? Pick an issue that you're interested in and tell me what you recommend. And so I did an initial survey that was the part one of this, and then I did a second survey, which was last week. And the link for that survey, which is still open, and I think you'll want to do it after hearing some of what I'm going to share today, is tinyurl.com/trulygreatcontent3. tinyurl.com/trulygreatcontent3, and that is the number 3. So on that survey, what you'll see if you go there, or if you've already gone there, is it's just going to ask you for your name, for your email address. You can make up a name if you want, but I need your email address, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to share other people's recommendations with you. That's the big incentive, is if you share your recommendations, then I'm going to share everyone else's recommendations with you. And if you don't, then I won't, except I'll talk about some of them on this show and maybe on future shows. So again, it's tinyurl.com/trulygreatcontent3. And what I want to do today is I just want to give you a sample, kind of a quick sample of the fascinating recommendations that I got. And I'm really happy with the results of this. For some people, the survey took a long time. Looks like it took people an average of 12 minutes. So people really put some time into this, and I really appreciate you putting the time into it, because it led to lots and lots of really good recommendations. And after seeing, there have only been 55 people who filled out the whole survey, but those have been good. I mean, that gives me months and months and months worth of really good material. And I'm gonna, in the next several weeks, I'm going to make this available to everybody who shared something, and I'll try to make it available in a format that makes it easy to just see all the links and whatnot. So let me just tell you, I have some thoughts, but they'll probably emerge just as I share some of the specific recommendations. Now, I haven't consumed any of these, so it might be that I mentioned something that was intriguing to me, and then it turns out, oh, this is horrible. So don't take this as Alex's endorsement, but it is at least Alex is intrigued, and that definitely by trying to get recommendations of good stuff from people we think can recognize good stuff, people who can recognize good thinking, people who are thoughtful themselves, what I think this is proving is that we can get really good content through the recommendations of other people. And that's not something that really is done a lot. It's done on social media in different ways occasionally, but there's a lot of junk surrounding it. And even in some cases, you'll see there are things that are recommended to me, even by people, referenced by people that I know, that I'm around all the time. And I didn't even know about this recommendation, because we don't have much of a culture of recommending really good, high quality thinking. And maybe we can change that. Okay. So here's just some of the things that came up, and there are so many of them, and I'm going to be tempted to talk about a lot of them, but just to give you a sense of it. And in no particular order. So one set of recommendations was by someone named Tom Nowak, and it was on the topic of determining and living by a purpose. So one thing I loved, by the way, is just with these lists that I got, there were all sorts of interesting topics that people chose. Things like determining and living by a purpose, which is a great topic, but it's not something that, you would ordinarily get as a topic. So one recommendation he made was Brett Victor inventing on principle, and there's a section which I encourage people to fill out for each recommendation called "Why I Recommend This," and he says this talk shows how very successful people in their industry identified a problem and made it their purpose in life to solve it. The whole video is fascinating in that it shows the tremendous success people achieved once they defined their goals. And then he also recommends Brett Victor's website. So I've never heard of this guy, but this is a damn good topic. I want to learn more about that. Now, one thing that I notice as I go through these is that one other issue that I have with content on the internet, not only is it hard to find good stuff, but it's often hard to, even when there's good stuff, it's often hard to find the essentials of it. And I really want the essentials of something quickly. So it'd be great as if I just had a little outline of, okay, this is what Brett Victor says. And that way I could get something quickly. And then I could also know, okay, is it worth watching this whole video? Okay, some more recommendations that are coming up. I'm just scanning through my list. Nobody take offense if you're not, if your recommendation is not here. Someone named Peter Guski, his topic was socialism versus capitalism, and he recommended, I don't know if this is the title of it, but it's some materials by a guy named Robert Ringer, whom I think I've heard of, but don't have much familiarity with. And he talks about economic improvement caused by capitalism, especially for the lowest unskilled labor. He talks about it as easy to understand. And in general, he's talking about how this particular thinker and writer is good at communicating the value of capitalism in a very effective way. So I am very interested in that. So that's a great kind of a recommendation. And I'm sure even if I don't agree with Robert Ringer on everything, I'm sure I'll learn something. By the way, a few of you just didn't actually recommend something. I think you just gave topics that you'd like recommendations on. So you're not going to get anything if you did that. So recommend something. Let's see. Ramana Reddy recommended on the topic of lifestyle something called the cult of busy. And he recommended it. And he said people should never say they're too busy to do X, but only that X is unimportant to warrant this or her time. And he says there's a great example involving a heart attack. So this sounds like something up my alley. So really interested in that. Let's see, what else do we have? Jeff Mayhew recommended some resources on management and personal effectiveness. He recommended in particular something called manager-tools.com. And he says this is his number one business podcast, at least. Maybe it's other people's too. Tons of super specific answers to any career or management question. Listening has helped me navigate career transition, learn to manage, etc. By the way, you'll notice that with many of the ones I'm citing here, these are ones where people have given good descriptions of why they recommended, and I find that is incredibly helpful. So if you fill out this survey, it's so helpful to give just a good, complete sentence or sentences explanation of it. Now, here's an interesting one. Topic-wise, William Desrosiers recommended stuff on the topic of Marvel Cinematic Universe, which that is certainly something that a lot of people consume. So, and interestingly, one thing I noticed is that when people recommend one thing that I think is good, I tend to trust the recommendations on other things too. So he recommends something called Emergency Awesome, which is this very interesting YouTube personality that I've seen in the past because I'll watch some show and I'll look for, hey, can I understand this? And then this guy is just extremely timely and knowledgeable just about every show and is really passionate about these shows. So this it's recommended here. But then there's also something recommended called Comics Explained. And then the recommendation is don't have enough time in the day to read 30 years of comics. So if you want to get up to date on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that seems good. Now, a friend of mine, Michael Mazzoni, who's an attorney, recommended stuff on law. And he's in particular recommending materials by somebody I know, Dr. Tara Smith. And I think all of these are by her. It seems like all of these are by her. But interestingly, there are things by her that I wasn't familiar with and that look super interesting. So this is a case where I know the person, I know Michael, and I even know the author, but for whatever reason, I'm not apprised of these things. And these are really interesting topics. Like neutrality isn't. So what Dr. Smith is doing is she is from an interesting perspective challenging traditional conservative interpretations of the Constitution, but from a very pro-Constitution standpoint, not from we can just make up stuff in the Constitution, which is my caricature of what is often done by non-conservative people. So she has this material on neutrality isn't neutral, on the value neutrality of the rule of law, reckless caution, the perils of judicial minimalism, a conceivable constitution, how the rational basis test throws darts and misses the mark. So this sounds like a really interesting thinking to process. Another topic entirely from Tomas on stretching. And he recommends someone called Kit Laughlin on YouTube and Vimeo and says, I'm a former elite athlete and I've been extremely tight in all joints and muscles. I've been stretching my whole life with no or little result. Kit and the others have truly taught me what it takes. Stretching for adults is like no other training. It takes months and months and certain techniques and focus. The result has been well worth it for me. So this is just, I like this kind of recommendation. I'm certainly somebody who has had a lot of trouble with stretching. So that's an intriguing lead. Jerry Glynn recommends content on mental models, and he recommends something called Farnham Street Blog, and he says that he heard about this from Don Watkins, who happens to be my employee. And yet I don't think I ever heard Don talk about this. So I'm glad that I'm getting a recommendation from Don through a listener to the show. And then there's also, he has a recommendation from, he recommends somebody, Scott Young, scottHyoung.com, who's focused on thinking ideas and tests them in practice to validate. For instance, he took an MIT 4-year computer science degree in 1 year online for free. All right, that's intriguing. So I think whatever your interests are, probably some of these are interesting to you, some of them aren't, but I think you can see, wow, there's some really good stuff that we've never heard of because there's no Google for good. So this is my very manual that's my very manual fix for this, but it's a good fix. How to read a book is a topic, and then the recommendation, there's just one here by Luca Bertolonio. I know I've met Luca, but my pronunciation does not indicate that I've met him. How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. So that's one that I've heard of, but had never pursued. Let's see. I'm just getting totally excited by these as I talk about them. There's some recommendations on History of Exploring by Geir Stale Klepp. Again, a mispronunciation by me, I'm sure. One in particular that struck me is Erebus, the Story of a Ship, Insight into Bold and Brave Search for Fame or Honor, and the Importance of Not Being Blinded by Self-Confidence. That sounds interesting. Okay, one of my favorite sets of recommendations on the topic of inequality by Corey Foisey. There's one website called Just Facts, which seems to have, he describes it as Just Facts. I think it's a man. Just Facts is an incredible resource with an exceptionally transparent modus operandi. They explain their methodology, why some studies were winnowed out and others not, and everything is very thorough and well-sourced. Wow, that sounds good. He recommends humanprogress.org, which is a great site. And then he recommends something which I have never seen called World Poverty Clock, worldpovertyclock.io. And he says, I wish I could keep this as a desktop background to remind me of how incredible human innovation, progress, and wealth creation is. Also, it's amazing to see individuals, one at a time, leaving extreme poverty and to know where that seems to be happening most. So that sounds awesome. So I've never seen most of the stuff I'm talking about. I've never heard of. Here's another interesting one on the topic of freedom. Alexander recommends Vision of the Anointed by Thomas Sowell. Now, Thomas Sowell is somebody I'm very familiar with, but this description intrigues me. I've never read that book of his. Describes how the ones who think they can change the world have no idea what will serve humanity without other trade-offs. I'm not exactly sure what means will serve humanity without other trade-offs, but it sounds like there's something really interesting there. So this makes me want to read or at least scan Vision of the Anointed. Now, I really wish that there were super condensed versions of these things, because then I could get the good stuff even more efficiently. Okay. Rohit Gupta on the topic of negotiation recommends Start with No by Jim Camp. And he says, this book changed how I looked at negotiations and explained experiences that left me flabbergasted. The key principle is the definition that negotiation is an attempt for two or more parties to reach an agreement, with each party having the right to veto. Everything flows from that. I even took a course from Jim. So, wow, that's a really good recommendation from Rohit. Thank you for that. Let's see. Matthew Galvin on the topic of man recommends somebody named Carl Lentz. I am interested whenever I see those of you who recommend just one person repeatedly. I have to say that does intrigue me, because I think, okay, there must be something interesting about this guy that you're really into this one person. Although Matthew recommends a couple of other people too, but he's got 3 on Carl Lentz. So yeah, that does intrigue me. And the more efficiently I can learn about these people and these ideas, the better. Okay, there's another one, interesting kind of recommendations by Jack Knudsen, and his topic is Arizona school liberalism. So that's a really interesting category. And he mentioned someone named Brian Kaplan, who's a professor at George Mason that I know, and who actually reviewed my book, The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, very thoughtfully and mostly positively. the book here that most interests me is called The Order of Public Reason, and it describes it as social orders as complex Hayekian knowledge systems. So I am quite interested in how Hayek talks of his ideas about the nature of knowledge in a society, so that sounds particularly intriguing to me. Let's see what else. There's a recommendation someone has for Warren Buffett's Letters to Shareholders, which I haven't read, but that sounds like a good thing to read. Okay, another person I know, Derek Bellamy, recommends materials on mental health and childhood trauma. And Derek with all of these, has very, very good reasons for recommending things. So he talks about The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller, the book that first woke me up to the impact that childhood experiences have on our mental health later in life and why. So on this topic, yeah, this seems like really interesting stuff that Derek recommends, and I appreciate the thoughtful descriptions. Another topic, applied epistemology and applied ethics. I'm certainly interested in that one. And the first recommendation is James Sedgwick's books on applied epistemology, thecertaintysite.com. I believe Mr. Sedgwick is deceased, but this is described as great chewing of the epistemology of objectivism. So I'm super interested in people who are taking objectivist epistemology and explaining it in useful and new ways. There's also a recommendation of Scott Young's Holistic Learning, and James Clear's blog. So this is a topic I'm super interested in, so I'll check these out in one form or another. Another set of recommendations, there are a bunch on investing. These are from Jennifer Worsley, and she in particular is recommending Harry Brown, and he has an idea called the permanent portfolio, a great investing idea based on various economic conditions. So that looks like it's worth looking into. I don't know much about Harry Brown. I know he ran for the Libertarian Party presidency once, he ran for the presidency as the Libertarian Party candidate, and I seem to remember something crazy about him, but he may well have really good, and I may be misremembering that, but I think there's definitely something I disagreed with strongly about his politics, which is pretty typical of me and somebody who's a Libertarian candidate, since I tend to disagree with them quite strongly, at least on how they think about foreign policy and the military, and sometimes they're anarchists. That's a whole other story, though. That sounds like an intriguing idea, so worth looking into, particularly if I can do it efficiently. Okay, Justin recommends some books that I am familiar with, and then particularly his topic is education, and he recommends The Story of My Life by Helen Keller. Beyond the fact that Helen Keller is fascinating and brilliant, she describes how she comes to grasp language and concepts, and this is incredibly important for educators to understand, the role of language in helping our mind identify our world and the freedom and power it gives us. That's a strong recommendation. Amar Banger has some interesting ones, but they're on things like, he has a lot on poker that seem really good, but on that topic at least, I am shockingly uninterested in poker, although I know a lot of people derive a lot of satisfaction. Poker, in my mind, has this, for me, it's something that is it's one of those things where maybe if I didn't have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I would get into it, because it seems like it's just very, very involved. And it's the kind of thing, I feel like if I put in a huge amount of time, I could get pretty good at it, and it would probably be pretty cool to get good at it and to think about those things. But because I'm not in that state, then I just play it never. Okay, David recommends on psychology, The Magic Question, How to Get What You Want in Half the Time. Good exercise in tapping into the power of your subconscious mind. I like that kind of title, How to Get What You Want in Half the Time. It's not promising something too crazy, but it's certainly appealing. Lindsay Brooks recommends on the topic of applied rationality, and Julia Galef just discovered her work, only absorbed a tiny fraction of it. And one of the recommendations is something called List of Unpopular Ideas, which is a title that I like. So maybe I'll look into Julia Galef. Another topic is playtime. Although this is actually Alex Eaton did this. I think Alex Eaton, he has really good recommendations here, but I think he's just doing it. I think he wants recommendations on playtime, and then he's just recommending really good content on a bunch of different subjects. But I really liked the way that he handled the individual ones. So he mentioned let's see. The one I was most intrigued by is core power yoga. He says, I was a high school athlete and have only ever done weightlifting and running as a workout. The sculpt classes they have is one of the best workouts I've ever done, and I always leave feeling really relaxed and refreshed. You just have to put up with 30 seconds of Eastern mysticism at the beginning and end of each class. That's a hell of a recommendation. Computer science, Fierro, and he recommended something on self-teaching computer science, teachyourselfcs.com. So if I want to get back into that, I would definitely need to basically start from scratch. So that seems like a good thing. KJ, on the topic of writing, that's a topic I'm interested in very much, especially right now, recommends Scrivener, which I had heard of, literatureandlatte.com, but word processing software for writers for better workflow. Okay, I should really look into that. And then The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, for any kind of creator, including especially writers, to break through inner blocks. So I've heard that recommended, but I never read it. So this is a good reminder of that. I'll just go through a few more. Actually, that is enough. That is a lot of stuff. So just big takeaway from this is that there's so much great thinking out there, but there's so much more non-great thinking out there. And it's really, really worth our time to try to find great thinking, preferably from different perspectives on issues that matter a lot to us. And if we can do that, any one thing can be really life-changing. And then having a whole bunch of things in our stack to consume, that can be really, really exciting. So I hope that some of the things I've mentioned today have been useful. But if you really want the good stuff, make sure that you go to tinyurl.com/trulygreatcontent3. And if you do that, then you will get access to everything that I talked about today and much, much more. So share that with friends, share that with all kinds of other people. And I'm really looking forward to getting dozens and dozens of more of these recommendations and having the problem of way too much good stuff that I want to consume. That is a good problem to have and much better than the problem of just being exposed to a ton of junk all the time and trying to sift through that. So hope you enjoyed the Search for Truly Great Content Part 3. If you have any questions, comments, love mail, or hate mail, email me at alex@alexepstein.com. Join the discussion on Facebook, facebook.com/humanflourishingproject, and get on the mailing list at humanflourishingproject.com. That is it for this week. I will speak to all of you next week. Until then, I'm Alex Epstein. This has been the Human Flourishing Project.